A big thing that's come up in coaching this week is the whole concept of forgiveness. Client after client after client has said, how do I let go? So, if there's ever two things that are related, it's the concept of forgiveness and the concept of letting go. In fact, you could say they're almost exactly the same. When it comes to forgiveness, basically, whatever religion you go and look at, if you wanted to go and look at them, whatever religion you study, what you'll find is that they've pretty much every religion that's faced planet Earth or turned up and had any significant number of adherents to it has practiced two concepts, and that's the idea of love and forgiveness. And so, if you were to get all the religions in the world and put them into one bundle and say, what have they got that's the same? Those are the two concepts that they all preach, is that we should love our fellow man and that we should practice forgiveness. The problem is, none of them being great at saying how do you do that, because they kind of go on the route that Nike, the famous tick thing, which says well, just do it. So just love your fellow man, and how do you do that? Well, just do. And how do you forgive? Well, you just do. And if you haven't, well, get on with it. And if you're struggling with that, well, maybe pray for guidance or ask a friend or whatever. But that's the limit of what you actually do. So I thought we could get some real gains of territory here for you personally by saying, well, what do you actually do? What is the process for forgiveness? So forgive me if there's a bit of a lead up, but it helps. It makes it actually shorter, longer term. And that is to say, okay, what are you actually hanging on to? So for most of us, when it comes to forgiveness, what we're hanging on to is anger or sadness or fear or shame or guilt, or a combination of those three, or those five, sorry, they're what we call the big five, but a combination of those. And simply what that means is you're holding on to those, probably in your mind justifiably so. And there are many things that we could be justifiably angry about. There are things that we should be sad about. And there's a lot of things we should actually be scared of. So these things are not meant to be made go away. And it's not as if you're supposed to stop feeling them. The problem with these things is that residually they create damage to us. There's an old saying that says being angry with someone and refusing to forgive them is like drinking poison, hoping that you're going to kill the other person. So really, we're not punished for being angry. We're punished by our anger. Our anger damages us. Our sadness unravels us. Our fear paralyzes us. So for our sake, we need to get them out. And for many people, the whole idea of forgiveness brings up an inner struggle, and that is, but if I forgive them, aren't I condoning what they did? Aren't I saying that it's okay for their bad behaviour? And therein lies the problem, is that we feel like if I practice forgiveness, I'm saying that it was okay, therefore I'm a victim and I don't want to make myself a victim. And for many people, that's where the brakes go on, and understandably so. What we need to do is look at ourselves rather than who offended us or hurt us or damaged us. Whether they actually meant it or not is probably just a case of degree rather than anything meaningful. So really what we're talking about here is what goes on inside of you. Well, it's pretty obvious. Anger, sadness, fear, shame, and guilt get bottled up. And what happens is that they get bottled up over a period of years. They come from all different sources for all different reasons. Those things, when they get to the top, when they're running a brimmer and we shake the container, that's us. In other words, when your life rattles you a little bit, then these things start to spurt out uncontrollably. And so we have anger outbursts, we collapse in attack, in sadness, we kind of have panic attacks. So these things start to control us, and we're not able to stop them from doing that because they built up within us. Obviously, if it hasn't become obvious already, the trick here is how do we get these feelings and move them out of our system? How do we release them out of our body or out of the container that we keep them in? Whether you say the container is your mind, your heart, or your body in general doesn't really matter. What's obvious is we've got to get them out. Once you understand you've got to get them out, then it's simply a matter of saying, okay, so how do I do that? Anger is best expressed with an inanimate object. A punching bag or a lounge suite is a fantastic thing to express anger to, because it's not a human being and no other person is damaged. Learning to cry and having what's called a good cry is a fantastic thing to do and a great skill to learn. Understanding that we're all overcome by fears of one thing or another makes it okay for you to be afraid and to say so, and to express that. So really what I'm talking about is a bottom line that we practice in all of our workshops, and that is the healing is in the expression of the feeling. Expression meaning to get out. That means that you sing it, dance it, paint it, write it, speak it, anything that gets it out of your system and saves you from holding on to it. Not all of those things are going to work, and many people have said to me, I can't write it, but I can speak it. Many others have said, well, I can speak it, or I can't speak it, but I could write it, or I could write poems about it, or I could write songs about it, or I could do whatever. So the actual avenue of expression for you as an individual is going to vary from you to everybody else. What most people do is they try something, it doesn't work, and they say, well, that's it. And they don't try another thing. So what you've got to do, say for anger, is you've got to try hitting a punching bag. If that's not it, then you've got to try hitting the lounge. If that's not it, maybe you yell in the swimming pool. If that's not it, maybe you whack the steering wheel in your car. There has to be a way for you to get that anger out. Perhaps you chop wood. Really, it doesn't matter what it is. But the big problem for most people is they try one thing and go, that didn't work. It's a little bit like meditation. I had a guy say to me one time, in fact, happens probably once or twice a year, someone will say to me, meditation, yeah, I tried that once, didn't work. And I go, once? And it didn't work, you idiot. This has worked for thousands of millions of people over generations, for thousands of years, for multiple cultures around the world, and you're saying you tried it once and it didn't work? Well, with anger, sadness, fear, shame, and guilt, getting them out of the system is not so much a matter of how you do it, but how often you try and how many different methods you try so that you can get them out of your system. Maybe you've got to talk to somebody. Maybe you've got to practice some writing. Maybe you've got to go out in the bush and figure out how to talk to a tree. I don't have the answer for you on that. I've got a whole bunch of suggestions. You've got the answer for you on that. But here's the thing. Once you get it out of your system, what will happen is it'll progressively start to move. So you can't expect that it's all going to come out in one go. One dose is probably not enough to deal with all of the residual anger or sadness or fear or shame or guilt that's built up in our lives. You may have some specific event. You're angry with somebody, they hurt you, and you want to forgive them, you want to get over it, and you're finding it difficult because you haven't realised that it might take several goes. You might have to actually write something that you don't post to them many times rather than write it once. So this whole expression thing is a progressive thing that you would need to put lots of time and effort into it. But here's the amazing thing. You do not have to do forgiveness. What happens is forgiveness turns up. So forgiveness is actually a sign that you've done the work. So as long as you keep expressing, as long as you keep getting it out of your system, as long as you keep letting it go and doing whatever seems like it's going to work for you, then eventually the day will come where you will find forgiveness. In other words, we cannot teach it. It's innate to us, and it turns up when we are stop carrying the burden. When we stop hanging on to it, then the burden is no longer there and forgiveness can be found. So forgiveness is it's like a blessing. It just comes boom like that. It's a sign you've done the work. It's not a thing that you do. And that's where most people don't get it. So when we think about it, what is forgiveness really? What have you got to release? What do you have to actually give up? Well, you've actually got to stop being angry. You've got to give up. Remember, this is giving it up for who? You've got to give up resentment. You've got to give up bitterness. You've got to give up being hard and forced and angry. So the real question about forgiveness is, who do you become? Well, actually, you become someone you respect and admire much more than you do at the moment, because we know that carrying this stuff with us makes us small. To rise above it is a great expression in terms of what forgiveness actually is. The day will come if you practice the work, if you do the work, and that's what I'm going to suggest to you, is you can't have the results without doing the work. It's a little bit like going to the gym. We all want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, if we're a bloke, I suppose. Maybe women don't, but we all want to look great, but not everybody wants to do the work. Well, the same is true with forgiveness. You have to actually do the work. And I've described there that previously what you've got to do in exploring what the work is and how it is, and then you've got to get on with it. So what happens is forgiveness turns up. It tells you you've done the work and you don't need to do any more work on that particular thing. Then what happens is you see it differently. At that point, the God within you, the universe, so to speak, your inner wisdom says to you, you know what, this thing that happened could be a blessing, because what have you freed yourself from? How have you changed? How have you grown? This particular dark or dirty event that took place in your life where you feel completely outraged about it, if you've got through it and if you've risen above it, then in fact you'll see that it was a blessing, that it was a message from God or the universe, that it was in fact the next lesson coming to you. And then what you'll find comes after forgiveness is gratitude. And you'll be grateful that this event or person happen because you've grown through it. And now there's a whole lot more self-respect, self-love, self-care. So forgiveness is something you all need to really give a go. We all need to practice constantly. Give it a go. Let me know how you feel about it.